am Norma Sherry, and welcome to the Norma Sherry Show. I have a treat for you today. I have former Army Intelligence Officer and Public Affairs Officer Captain Eric May with us today. We're going to discuss 911, Army Intelligence, propaganda, and I did say 911, everything that you think you know about, you're going to learn is not the way it really is. Stay tuned. I promise this is going to be a show you don't want to miss. Set your VCRs. Catch every minute of this and then share it with all your friends. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm Norma Sherry, and my guest is Captain Eric May. I am so delighted to have you with us. Thank you.
It's a great pleasure to be here. My wife and I have been vacationing in your lovely state of Florida. And
lucky for us, because you're from Texas.
It was a nice escape from Texas, although I suppose Florida weather is kind of comparable. We're Houston people.
Yes, but you don't have this amazing view we do.
We do not have this view. It's beautiful here, particularly in San Augustine.
I agree. I want to ask you, and for my audience that doesn't know, what exactly is an Army Intelligence Officer?
Okay, Army Intelligence is all the services have military intelligence, and that can entail everything from being the guy in a small unit who does things like gets reports from scouts, and figures out what kind of enemy we're facing, when we're likely to be attacked. What kind of weapons we might wind up fighting against. That's called tactical intelligence. And all Army intelligence officers start out with the basics, tactical intelligence, working for usually a battalion commander, working in small units to try to be the eyes and ears of the commander, so to speak. As we move up, we can start getting into higher and higher realms of intelligence, theater and strategic intelligence. And I went through all those steps. My own career began as a second lieutenant commissioned in military intelligence back in 1983. I went to Fort Huachuca, Arizona, like all intelligence officers did. And I was fortunate in having a linguistic aptitude that was real high. So those being the good old days of the Cold War, I was sent out to Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, where I became fluent in Russian.
Wow.
Right. It was nice. It was a nice trip. Monterey's a beautiful place.
It is,
if
too.
If you're good at languages, it's a great trip. If
Absolutely.
you're not good at languages, it's a miserable school to be in because it's intensive. I was posted to an intelligence unit, the 629th Battalion in Washington, D.C., in the Washington, D.C. area. And after coming off active duty, I came back home to Houston, Texas, where I was assigned to the 75th Division, an exercise and training division that specialized in training large-scale scenarios, like training 2 or 3 divisions at a time as to what we would do if the Russians came across into Germany, or what would we do if the Koreans came south from North Korea into South Korea. So I worked on, you could say, war game cells at a high level. And my specialty as I did that was as an OPFOR officer. OPFOR means opposing forces. So military intelligence officers, especially those of us who become opposing forces specialists, are really unique. Our whole patriotic mission is to pretend like we're the enemy.
Yes, right.
Our job is to learn to think red. In any military scenario or exercise, there are blue forces, and those are called friendlies, and there are red forces. Those are hostile forces. I became an expert in thinking like a hostile force commander.
Interesting.
After 5 years doing that, I was put onto the general staff because I had begun writing for various newspapers, the Houston Chronicle and Houston Post particularly, into a lot of cultural stuff and some military specialties. And they made me the general staff public affairs officer. So I was trained at the United States Defense Information School, DINFOS as it's called, to be a full-blooded military spokesman, which gives me a lot of insight into how military information, or in the current context of Iraq, misinformation goes about.
Well, now that you brought that up, because that's of great interest to me, let's talk about that, misinformation of Iraq.
Sure. Well, let's start with something concrete and small.
Okay.
I was pretty much enjoying myself, not really paying much attention to military things. My last active duty was in 1998. So I had no connection with the military, and only took an intellectual interest in the upcoming war with Iraq in 2003. But in April of 2003, 4 years ago now, I noticed that the battle beginning at Baghdad airport when we invaded Iraq suddenly got censored out by the mass news media, the embedded media. The term embedded told you.
Oh, I dislike that so much.
Yeah, right. It was a term that I think it was a kind of joke they were playing on us.
I agree.
They had given up the journalistic integrity. They filtered out the Battle of Baghdad, and for 2-3 days we got Private Jessica Lynch.
Right.
Which
I remember.
Just now, this week, this being the month of April, Congress has just now held hearings to force the military to admit that the Private Jessica story was contrived at every level. And
really?
Yes, it's finally been admitted that there was deliberate attempt on the part of the military to pump up a story, in this case a story about a cute girl named Jessica. You know, it harkened back memories to those of us who are older of baby Jessica who fell in a well.
Absolutely.
2 decades ago.
Right.
It was a cynical attempt to take a girl hero story, and they pumped that all the way up and used it as a distraction from what was really happening that the public was not allowed to know about, which was that in Baghdad, starting with Baghdad airport, we were in a terrible firefight and took many hundreds of casualties. All of that was censored from the public through the disinformation or misinformation.
The Battle of Baghdad.
The Battle of Baghdad. The Battle of Baghdad was a real thing, and in fact, you'll see that the media that accepted the military misinformation of Private Jessica was very careful to continue to cover the tracks, because you'll never hear the words Battle of Baghdad said.
Never.
They talk about since the fall of Saddam.
Right.
Or since the fall of Baghdad.
Right.
But you never understand that Baghdad didn't just fall, and neither did Saddam.
It was a huge battle.
Now, the term, the fall of Saddam, is a psychological warfare trick, because they're trying to make our minds go back to what we're supposed to remember about Baghdad, which is when we pulled down the statue of Saddam.
Right.
Now, that was a set-up photo. That was done.
It was so clearly a set-up photo.
Set-up photo. Those were not spontaneous Iraqi demonstrators. Those were people who were extras for a Hollywood scene.
Oh, you're kidding me.
No. In fact, as you look out from if you get a larger pan of the picture than just around the statue, you'll see that if you look directly at the statue and the statue coming down, you see frantic people stamping on Saddam, insulting him by hitting him with their shoes and whatnot. But if you pan out, it turns out that that's the only place there are people. There are huge spaces in the plaza that are empty. There was no mass demonstration.
Wow.
But we had already told the American public, I say we, because remember, this whole propaganda apparatus that I'm criticizing, I'm a trained part of. I'm just the good guy from the dark side of the force.
I was going to say, you're courageous, are you not, to be speaking up and speaking out?
Well,
there are not enough Captain Eric Mays out there doing this.
There have been a few others, but many of them, a handful of them I could mention, have been killed. I've been operating under death threats since I took this mission on.